Good morning. Let's call the meeting to order, and we will start this morning with a prayer from Reverend Reuben Metcalf of the San Angelo Cowboy Church.
Good morning. How about that rain?
Yay.
It's all right. Let's pray. Father, thank you this morning for an opportunity to just live life. And then, Lord, we want to ask you to help us. We're a needy people. But then, Lord, this morning I pray as this council meets that, Lord, you would give us divine wisdom and knowledge that comes from you, that we would understand what your will is and that we might honor that. Father, this morning also I pray for those that, for our needs. Lord, we know there's a great agenda today for water. And Lord, we're pleading to you for that you might help us with that in the form of rain. And Lord, we thank you for that. So help us today. Help this group, these people. I pray, Lord, that your blessings would be upon the work that they do today. And we'll thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you very much. You can take a picture of me doing the pledge. We have any children at heart that want to come do the pledge with me? Okay, I'm a big boy. I can do it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Great job.
What? I'm ready for all the nice job and yeah, it's a hard group. Okay, fine. Every week you clap and tell them how well they did. Okay. This morning I have a recognition that I'm pleased to get an opportunity to pass on. So, Ms. Favre, how about joining me up here? A.J. Favre, who is our planning manager, has been named to the American Institute of Certified Planners. The AICP is the American Planning Association's professional institute, providing recognized leadership nationwide in the certification of professional planners, ethics, professional development, planning education, and the standards of planning practice. Where's the part about dealing with council? To become a certified planner, APA members must meet certain education and experience requirements and pass a written examination. AICP certified planners carry a high mark of distinction because they are required to meet rigorous standards, maintain their expertise through continuing education, and serve community interests. Congratulations. So I have a certificate here for Ms. Favre in the planning department. Thank you very much.
I would be remiss if I didn't thank all of my supervisors and my coworkers in the Community and Economic Development Department who've been very supportive through the process, and some of which have helped me study things that I wasn't so up on, such as stormwater management and things of that nature. So thank you to all of them as well.
Let's do some like leg wrestling and stuff, the left versus the right. Okay. At this time, the council takes public comment The council takes public comment on all items in the regular agenda. Public input on a regular agenda item will be taken at its appropriate discussion. Public input on an item not on the agenda or the consent agenda may be identified and requested for consideration by the council at this time. The council may request an item to be placed on a future agenda or for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for public comment. Is there desire by council to move anything? Or
I'd like number 3, Mayor.
3? Anything else? Okay. How about a motion?
Motion to approve the consent agenda, polling item number 3, please.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Okay. And at this time, let me bring up the public for anything that's not on the agenda or the consent agenda. Public comment at this time? Good morning.
Good morning. This is not on your agenda right now. It will be next month. First of all, I'm sorry. I'm Jennifer Boggs. I'm with the Planning Commission. I'm going to go ahead and apologize for doing this month as opposed to next month, but we are not sure of the availability next month to be here to comment. So yesterday we approved a zoning item concerning the San Angelo Soccer Association complex. It's very simple zoning, put some signs up. Something that came up in that process, though, was an issue of public safety. And it is my understanding that what we approved yesterday will also allow the city to raise the height of the fences that are on the street, the Glenna side of the soccer complexes. And what we really wanted to do was encourage you guys to join us in encouraging the city to go ahead and raise the height of those fences. Frankly, however many signs we put in the soccer complex, sure, that helps people be able to see it. It stops people from trying to make a U-turn in Glenna. That's great, but it doesn't mean anything if a child chases a ball into a street and gets hit by a car. It's 40 to 45 miles per hour on that street, particularly where the soccer complex is, and we feel like public safety is a paramount concern. We think that should be a paramount consideration in the comprehensive plan, and we just wanted to encourage you guys to take that under advisement and to join us in encouraging the city to take that into consideration as well when you see this case next month.
Okay. Questions
That's
for
all.
her? One question for you.
Okay.
What's the financial capability of the San Angelo Soccer Association to take care of the soccer fields?
I honestly do not know. You'll have to ask them that next month. As far as I understand, this is a lease with the city, so I'm not entirely sure whose responsibility it will be. But I know the gentleman that presented to us yesterday was from the city.
That'd be perfect. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other public comment at this time? Okay, she's running from public comment. Okay, very good. The consent agenda then, I'd like to call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve with the removal of item number 3, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 3, the consideration of authorizing the interim city manager to execute a grant agreement accepting the Federal Aviation Administration's fiscal year 2012 multi-year grant estimated at $4 million, for which $444,444 will be the city's portion in matching funds. Mr. Silvas, how about helping us out?
Lou, I was just looking at this the other day, and I just needed clarification. The estimated $4 million, and then the matching part that we do. But as I looked in the grant, the paperwork itself, whatever you want to call it, I noticed that there was a total of $5 million in the agreement. So that's where I was confused. Let me pull it up. It was broken down, and then there was, I believe it was page 7. Do you have your hard copy with you? You don't?
City clerk has it.
Okay. I wish I would have had mine pulled up. Estimated funding, it says federal, $5,074,000, and then it talks about an applicant, $563,000, other $467,000, for a total of $6,105,000. That's where I was.
Are you on page 707?
Well, now, I saw it on 7, I'm on 10 now. That's the first numbers that came to mind right there. Let me see.
Oh, that was the
Budgeted.
application. Yes, that was the application, sir. The difference from the 4 million was applied in grant number 32, which was last year's.
So it
This,
wasn't-
this was for the whole project for the terminal. So the first 1,074,000 came last year, FY 2011, in grant number 32.
Well, it'll be $1 million each year for the next 4 years. Is that
Correct.
correct? Well, but the total, I mean, that's 4 million plus 444,000 on our part. But the 5 million is
That-
a total project?
Yes, it's 5.1 million total, and that was the application that was made for the terminal project. However, the FAA gave us a little over $1 million last year in FY 2011, so the remaining in a multi-year is coming now.
Okay, and that's where I was confused. It estimated 4 million, but then I say 6.1 million.
Right.
That's all I needed.
Okay.
Lou, thank you.
Mr. Silvas, are you satisfied?
I'm satisfied.
And so would you like to make
Make a motion for approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. And so let me call for this vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Let's move forward then to the regular agenda. On the regular agenda, our first item this morning is a presentation and update from Downtown San Angelo's Main Street program. Presentation is from Downtown San Angelo's President Brenda Gunter. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Brenda Gunter, Downtown San Angelo, President and Acting Executive Director at the moment. So I'd like to begin with, certainly we continue to attend all of the meetings that City Council, COSA DC, and all the other economic development meetings that pertain to downtown. But what we'd like to talk today about is some of the other things that have occurred in the second quarter. One being, as you're well aware, of the First Lady's Tour, which was in May. The important part about that is that San Angelo is the only city in the state of Texas that we're aware of that has ever received all 3 awards, not only in 1 year, but ever. And so we're proud to say that San Angelo exhibits one of the best private and public partnerships that I think exist in the state of Texas. And the important part to remember there is that no city can ever accomplish those goals and those awards without a strong partnership between the city government and the private sector. And so we thank you for that support, and we thank all the public, the private people who have helped make San Angelo a hero, we believe, in the eyes of the state of Texas. When you have the First Lady of Texas attend the meeting, and when she gets ready to leave, she says, "I'm so sorry that I don't have more time to spend, because based off of that video, San Angelo is a city I would have liked to spend a lot more time in and seen all the wonderful things that exist in the downtown area." So I think that's a great compliment, once again, to the city of San Angelo.
Brenda, let me ask you real quick.
Yes.
Where those signs, those designation, Texas Treasure, where have those been placed?
We are working on those signs now. We have,
They're not
working
up
with
yet.
Tex, they're not up yet. They will be. We're going to get a sign that, 4 locations, we believe, and that has to go through TxDOT. So we'll be working on those. However, there was an ad run in Texas Highway Magazine that announced in June the actual all 3 awards for the city of San Angelo. So it has been made a pretty big public statement. In addition to that, we will be running a series in Texas Monthly in the month of December, which will be not only editorializing
San Angelo and those awards, but also the support of merchants have purchased ads in that magazine as well. So we intend to have a very strong presence in the month of December.
Thank you.
Also in the month of May, we had a loft tour. We continually talk about the importance of downtown residential living. We had over 100 people attend the meeting, the loft tour. It was a tour of 7 buildings. Some of them have obviously been showcased before in a loft tour, but there was great interest in the development on 30 West Beauregard, which are the new loft apartments that I think you've seen several articles written about. We hope that there's some other projects in the works, and so we continue to work on the idea of downtown living. We know that's a key component part to the success of downtown. In addition, we applied for an AEP grant. We applied for $100,000 to the AEP Foundation, the state of Texas. Generally, it takes 3 to 5 years, we've been told, to even get passed on to the national level. We were awarded that as an opportunity to apply for the national level. We have not heard back from them yet. They reduced our request from $100,000 to $50,000, but Fred Hernandez was shocked that in the first year of our application that we were even forwarded on to the national level. So we have some hope that we will receive that grant, and that we would like to apply to the downtown streetscape. Based off of the original streetscape program that was presented and approved by council, due to lack of available monies under the TIERS program, it looks like it will be a project that is much in delay, and so we're reanalyzing the streetscape program, looking at opportunities to do small pieces of that so that there's some movement forward on that. As you're aware, Shannon pulled a lot of their buildings and properties out of the tax rolls, so when you take a $17 million tax roll hit, the TIERS funds reduce dynamically, in fact, 50%. So there's something less than $68,000 a year in the Southern TIERS Fund for application towards a lot of the programs. So that's had a big impact on our streetscape hopes and plans. There is progress being made on it, but not to the level that we would hope. We're also looking at 3 other opportunities that we hope will be some additional funds that we could apply. If we had a wish list, the first thing that we would look for is certainly burying the power lines, and second, replacing those existing lights on Chadbourne and replacing these with a little more pedestrian-friendly lighting. So those are the things that we're looking at right now.
And the sidewalk.
Excuse me, and and I should say that those sidewalks, as a part of the Freedom Grant, will be done, and all of the bad sidewalks, handicap, will get taken care of. So that has been the priority. That is being done. That has not stopped that process. It's just the enhancements that have become a problem. Yes?
Brenda, me representing downtown, you mentioned Shannon pulled buildings off the tax. How many buildings? And I always assumed Shannon didn't pay any taxes anyway. So
They did, to the level of...
How many buildings are we talking about?
I don't know the number of buildings. I know the dollar value of those buildings that were pulled. Shannon is not just one big Shannon. There's the nonprofit piece of it.
Mhm.
And those buildings and properties had been paying taxes on that, to the point that there was a $17.3 million, I believe, total value of Shannon properties that were pulled off of the tax rolls and pulled into their nonprofit.
Wow.
And that was approved sometime earlier this year. So that had a major, major impact on the TIERS Fund, because that was almost 50% of what was being put into the Southern TIERS Fund. So that has a dynamic impact, as well as several other buildings, like the Coca-Cola buildings that have been pulled off the tax rolls. So we've had a big hit in the Southern TIERS for funds. As it relates to the executive director, we posted the job early July. We kept the job posted to the end of August. We've received about 20 applications. 6 of those we believe are viable applications that we will start the interview process on in the next 10 days. And then the final issue that we've worked on is the Roosevelt Hotel. As you also know, that was a Shannon Hospital property, which they had purchased primarily to prevent the homeless and the vagrants from getting into that building, as they owned the parking lot behind it, and many of their employees had been harassed by homeless. So they had bought that property for that purpose was to protect that parking lot. They had no intention of really doing anything with the building. And so consequently, they were looking at perhaps destroying that building. And we as a downtown organization felt very strongly that that would be a negative for downtown, particularly because of the location, but also the historic aspect of that building. So we worked with Shannon, and I will say that downtown San Angelo is the proud owner of the Roosevelt Hotel today. Obviously, with the funds that we have in downtown San Angelo, we don't have the opportunity to actually renovate that building, but we have are working on several projects to take that building and get some progress started on it. Number one, we applied for a Brownsfield Fund grant. We've not heard back from them. And a Brownsfield Fund grant is a grant that in fact will come in and remove all of the environmental issues from that building, with the expectation that they could pay for up to 80% of those costs, and then the other 20% we would be responsible for. They sent 2 engineers here the first part of July and have done an environmental assessment of that building. We do not have that report back, but in fact they have taken care of that. We're also working with the city. Ron Lewis came in and took walk through the building to see if there would be an opportunity for the prisoners to help clean out some of the trash and additional things that are in that. We hope that we can, and we are working on several people who've contacted us that would like to develop that building. There's no progress on it right now, but I repeat, our intention is not to actually develop it ourselves. We don't have the funds, don't have the capability, but think it's an important building, an important location that we think needed to be preserved. If you take a look at the local sales tax allocation for second quarter, the city of San Angelo picked up 11.4% or $569,578 over and above the previous year. If you look at our Main Street area, you'll see that we had $253,942 in sales tax revenue, which was $11,151 less than a year ago. But a year ago we had a $72,590 drop in sales tax revenue. So we're starting to anniversary that huge hit. And so that was down 4.2%. In the Central Business District, we were down 5.2% or $4,081. And again, compared to the drop from last year of $77,000, again, we're starting to anniversary those numbers. We will say that not that we're anticipating bad numbers in third quarter, but several things certainly have happened. Number one, you have the McDonald's on North Bryant Boulevard that's being closed for 90 days. And knowing the amount of volume that a McDonald's does, you can be assured that it will have an impact on our sales tax dollars in third quarter. Our mixed beverage tax summary, if you look on it on an annualized basis, of which only the first 2 quarters would be reporting, the city of San Angelo's first and second quarter dollars represent 57.5% of last year's dollars. If you look at Central Business District, it would represent 64% of the dollars, and in the Main Street, 59%. So it basically is saying that with those sales, those mixed beverage dollars, that we would continue to improve in the mixed beverage tax summary dollars this year versus last year. On the quarterly mixed beverage, actually looking on a quarterly basis, the city of San Angelo in the second quarter picked up 12.2% over last year's dollars of $608,000. The Central Business District picked up 41.1% over last year's dollars. And the Main Street District picked up 26.6% over last year's mixed beverage dollars in the second quarter. It would reflect that in the Main Street District, the mixed beverage tax dollars now in the downtown area represent 25.5% of the total mixed tax beverage dollars. And if you look at that compared to last year's second quarter, we represented 22.6%. So we're continuing to pick up a percentage points in the amount of liquor tax dollars being created by the downtown district. If you combine the retail sales tax and the mixed beverage tax dollars, you will see that the city of San Angelo had 11.5% increase over second quarter last year. The central business district had a 20% increase over last year, and the Main Street had a 6.3% increase. So when you combine those two, we're starting to show a positive increase over the dollars from the previous year. If you look at the real estate properties that have changed hands or had improvements, there's a residence on 428 West Concho Avenue that sold for $130,000, $539. You had medical offices that sold for $212,500 on East Harris Avenue. There was a $17,000 improvement to the location at 109 South Chadbourn to improve bathrooms to code. And that building also sold for $125,500. The next slide is a slide that we've shown you before, and the only reason we're showing it today is previously we did not have a value of that building. We knew it had sold, but it had not yet hit the record. So just to go on record of saying that it sold for $212,500. Certainly the graphic that shows their vision for it, I'm not sure that will be an accurate vision for the project going forward, but the project at this point is going forward, and we're excited about the opportunity between a bed and breakfast, restaurant, private room, etc. And once again, the opportunity to use a building that is closed today for future use. So we're excited that that's moving forward. And then there was a remodel at 401 West Tuwig for $2,500. And then the Angelo ISD public project of $775,000. And then improvements to the Fox Broadcasting building. Cattleman Steakhouse, which is in the Clarion Inn Hotel, a $40,000 remodel for their restaurant in that building. And then $75,000 adding a conference room to John Sutton's building at 117 South Irving. And then the new construction on West Highland of $790,040 on new office, Class A office space on Highland. And $2,500 in the Shannon's Women's Children's Building at 201 East Harris Avenue. That is obviously a small remodel. In second quarter of 2012, the total
Brenda.
business starts and
Brenda,
expansions were
excuse
eight.
me.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just have to ask.
Sure.
But all these remodels and sales, how does it apply to the downtown or your report? What significance?
Number one, it's activity. So any activity is better than no activity. And most people, when they're spending money to improve a project, intend to use that building. And whether it is simply to meet code, obviously code has to be met. So you either meet code or you get shut down. So the important part is that they're doing it. Second of all, in most cases, with the price that people are paying to buy these buildings, no one's buying them to leave them empty and sit there.
Okay.
Obviously, the intent is to do something with that business, and we would rather have the opportunity to have a business create sales tax revenue or liquor tax revenue than an empty building.
That's what I was getting at. Okay.
And as you know, when we first started this project, one of the big conversations that constantly came up is, how about all those empty buildings in downtown San Angelo? When you take a look at the development that's happening, in most cases, you're looking at development that's happened by the small business entrepreneurship. And that, as we know, is a key component part to San Angelo, Texas. It's not about the big corporations. And not that they're not important, but a lot of what makes up San Angelo is a small business. And anytime we can add new small business, we're ahead of the game.
Okay.
Any other questions? Net gain in businesses was 6, net gain in jobs 18, volunteer hours logged 1,800. from 2005 until second quarter of 2012, we've had a cumulative reinvestment of $62,055,942. Again, that goes back to say that if you look at that, our downtown business district, we're a whole lot better today, having spent $62 million instead of the constant deterioration, because that's the other thing you start looking at. If there wasn't small investment, there'd probably be continued deterioration, and then you'd have a large-scale business district that was way behind the 8 ball and probably a very difficult time to get it up and running again. As it relates to the finances for downtown San Angelo, in the ordinary income expense, our budget was $123,283. We came in at $118,983 with a difference of $4,300. The big difference is the $5,000 corporate, which was booked in second quarter, which is actually going to happen in third quarter, so it's just a shift in that. So if you add that $5,000 in, we would be $700 over and above ordinary income or expense. If you take a look at our expense structure, January through June, we had a budget of $179.8 thousand, and our expenses came in at $78,473. Making our net ordinary income of $40,509 against a plan of $19,800. The two big areas of differences between budget and actual, one is in the events category, which is primarily a category that a lot of things are put into, so that this report isn't a 20-page report. One is the $10,000 that we had budgeted for the Pocket Park. None of those expenses were booked through second quarter. They will be reflected in our third quarter. The same thing, the $5,000 corporate sponsorship that we had, which was originally planned for second quarter, is now going to be in third quarter. So that's $15,000 of the $19,000. And then there's just some of the marketing dollars that will be shifted into October as well in third quarter.
Question for you is, your salaries you would think would be down, so tell me something.
Because this is second quarter, which is through the month of June, and July is when Janora left, so they're not, because through June we
Okay.
had
Good
actually
answer. All
those
right.
people.
I have a question.
Yes.
Speaking of events, I have heard, this is just rumor, that we are going to do away with any street events out there, closing of streets, or that's the direction we're going in?
No.
Anybody?
We had a meeting with the police department, the fire department, the emergency services department to discuss street closures, because as you know, or don't know maybe, that more and more people are requesting street closures. And the one big issue was Chadburn Street, because that is the street of which the emergency vehicles use. And so when you start closing off Chadburn Street, then rerouting emergency vehicles, fire trucks, and or ambulances becomes a big issue. So we had a meeting to discuss how to handle that. Certainly one of the questions that comes up, do you stop doing street closures? Our decision is not to do that, but to look at how we make sure that we also don't get in the way of fire trucks being able to get through there, ambulances being able to get through there. And the result was that for example, the event that happened on September 2nd, they kept a 20-foot wide area that was open, although there were barriers at the ends of the streets. Those barriers could easily be moved, and those emergency vehicles could come through fast. There is concern on some people's part that when we close the streets, for example, when we close Oaks, that it has a negative impact on the museum attendance and on the Fort Concho attendance. So there are questions. I mean, anytime you close a street, you lose parking, you prevent thorough traffic. I mean, so all those issues have to be discussed, but our intent is not to stop doing events. Our intent is not to stop closing off streets, but we also have to have a vision for how you do that, how successfully you do it, and you can't do it in a boxed-off mentality. You got to look at the big impact on everybody and make sure that you've looked at all of those issues. And, in the past, those issues might not have been so obvious because we didn't do it so often. We're doing it more often now. Other people are complaining. We're trying to address all those issues and make sure that we don't hurt anybody, but we're in the business of helping get these events done successfully.
I agree. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Let me ask you one question, okay? This is, I'm looking at when we set up the Business Resource Center,
Mm-hmm.
we talked then about office space.
Right.
Okay. But at the time, you had office space already rented.
Correct.
So it didn't make sense really to ask you to move into the Business Resource Center.
Correct.
But you are economic development.
Correct.
Without question. So you fit nicely into that package. You have since leased other office space.
Correct.
What's the lease term on that office space?
Month to month. But if
Okay.
you, two things. Number one, if you take a look at the Business Resource Center,
Okay.
I think we have 300 square feet. We basically have room for a desk in that
Okay.
space. And second of all, one of the key component parts of a downtown or a Main Street program is the idea that you are there to support a lot of the private business people. And that our success generally tends to be that we are not the government officials. We are there to help the private citizens walk through, talk through, whatever. So the idea is that we don't want to be just looked at as part of downtown as the city of San Angelo government, but as somebody who can just walk in our front door and talk to us, and that we can help them in the process of being on their side in working with the city.
The flip side to that, though, is we're one of your donors.
Correct.
Okay. And so the idea that there would be rent income or that could be an in-kind type of donation would be very helpful for the taxpayer.
Correct.
And the fact that you would be there, and I'm a member of the Angel Network, which is a private entity that is
Right.
that's housed at the Business Resource Center. And so you have different entities there. The Small Business Development Center is really an ASU function. Anyway, I leave that as, let's not try to solve the problem here, but let's at least acknowledge that it's a discussion worth continuing.
Sure.
Okay.
And you'll note that one of the issues on the financials is certainly the difference in rent. Our expense today is no more than it was in the previous location, but in addition to that, our budget reflected being in that Business Resource Center earlier on in the year. So when you see the differences in rent, it's because we budgeted from, I think, April through December to pay the monthly fee that was associated with the Business Resource Center, which we're obviously not there yet. But it's budgeted.
Okay. Well, again, what I'm looking for is a continued discussion.
Okay.
Wanted to bring up the subject. Is there anything else to ask questions about? Okay. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the status update and discussion of Avenue P drainage remediation project. Presentation by City Engineer Clinton Bailey. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Let me find my presentation. What I'd like to do up front here is quickly go through, give a little background on this project, where the problem is located, the steps we've gone through to get to where we are now designing the project, about to bid that and hopefully construct it in the near future. I know that we have people from the neighborhood here, and I believe we have a few non-English speaking persons in the back that may need a little help understanding the presentation. Starting off with the neighborhood, this area where Avenue P runs through, this neighborhood is generally bound by Avenue N on the north, Bryant on the west, South Chadburn on the east, and way down to Avenue Z, close to the Contra River on the south. It's a true neighborhood. When you talk to the folks in this neighborhood, there are many generations of families that have lived there. There are some of these homes that have the fourth generation of a family living in them. Most of the homes were built back in the 40s and 50s. And talking with people, they've seen as development has increased in certain areas, the increase in the runoff through this neighborhood from way back when, before Bryant even existed, when there wasn't much of a problem, to now when the area upstream's been just almost fully developed and there's a pretty significant problem. So long history of flooding, dating back decades, and really there are dozens of people during a big rainfall event that are impacted by water coming through this area, either running through their yards or in many cases running into their homes. So how did this project come about? How was it prioritized? Going back to our 2000 master drainage plan developed by Friesen-Nichols, where we analyzed the 57 drainage problem areas in San Angelo, prioritized, ranked the top 25 based on amount of flow, disruption to traffic, emergency response routes, history of flooding structures, that sort of thing. Avenue P ended up number 2 on that top 25 list of problems. So what have we done over the course of the latter part of last year, this year? The council has talked about making streets and stormwater a priority. On the heels of discussions with the council, we had a public meeting with the Avenue P neighborhood back in September of last year, where then city manager Harold Dominguez, myself, Councilman Silvas were in attendance. We listened to the concerns of the citizens in the neighborhood. We talked about options for addressing the drainage problem, options for funding. Really had a good meeting. There's some people that had some serious concerns, beat us up just a little bit, but at the end of the meeting, I think that they were real happy with what they heard. Following that up, we had a city council discussion late last year during the presentation on capital planning projects, where we had talked about dividing up a $1.7 million pot between streets, stormwater, and some emergency access vehicles. We presented the top 5 drainage problems, and the council decided from that presentation that the Avenue P project would be funded, $700,000 out of the 11-12 budget and about $1 million out of the 12-13 budget. So for those that haven't been in the area when it's raining, I have a pretty good log of photos. This is Avenue P looking back west toward Bryant. If you look back in the very back, you can see the culvert structure underneath underneath Bryant on Avenue P right here, where the main concentration of flow comes across into this neighborhood. Now, we got here after the water had gone down just a little bit. I've seen this actually completely covering the yards in this area. This was back from 2007. This is an alley just south of Avenue P, where the flow splits, and again, you have flow in the front of the homes and the back, impacts in both areas. This is a photo taken August 13th last year when we had the big rain event. This is 10 Avenue Q, which is at the intersection of Irving and Avenue Q, just south of Avenue P. The flow currently turns more toward Avenue Q to flow down a drainage channel that eventually ends up in the arroyo. But here's the same vehicle 2 days later, and you can see the debris in the grill, how high that water was flowing through there. And again, damage on the side of this house, erosion of the foundation, and this is typical of some of the areas through there. This is a newer home in this area. This is the garage. And here's Councilman Silva. So you can see the water line on the wall right here was probably about 15 inches deep or so in that area. So where's all this water coming from? The overall drainage area contributing to this problem area is about 450 acres. If you look at this large area just west of Bryant, upstream, this is about 381 acres that contributes to flow that discharges at Avenue P under Bryant. And as you can see, a lot of this area is developed. We have Angelo State University, we have neighborhoods, we have businesses, restaurants, Bryant Boulevard. But at the same time, we have large areas that are not yet developed that could potentially further impact this area. So through our new stormwater ordinance, we're looking to try to get that development to develop wisely with detention and not discharge more than they're currently discharging. So a large area, a lot of impervious area that has been developed over the years has caused the problem that we see today. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our stormwater engineer, Tim Wolf, to give you a little bit more specifics on the project and project timeline.
Good morning. I hope he scared you enough so he brings you all the doom and gloom, and I'll bring you a solution. So what are we going to do with all this water? Well, we're going to take the majority of it underground, take it all under Avenue P. It's going to start right there at Bryant Boulevard where it crosses through that culvert, go underground, and all the way down to the other side of South Chadburn. It's going to have to make a little jog, go diagonally a little bit, and then discharge on the other side of South Chadburn into its vacant land right now. We'll get an easement through there and dig a little swale or a ditch all the way to the Red Arroyo, which is just off the screen, off to the right there. It's about 2,300 linear feet of storm drain underneath Avenue P, running that whole distance. At the end of that, there'll be about a 300-foot open channel down to the Red Arroyo. There's 9 inlets on all the crossing streets, picking up drainage that are from the local area right there, picking up all that drainage, carrying that to the storm drain underneath, and then, like I said, it'll turn across Chadburn Street, discharge into that channel. This is that culvert right there at South Bryant. That is a 6-barrel 3x6. It's 3 foot tall, 6 foot wide boxes, and there's 6 of those, so you can kind of get an idea of about what kind of water is flowing through there by looking at that, and we're going to have to take that underground.
So you will start from that point right there?
Correct.
And this
Start
is
from
the
that
east side of Bryant, correct?
Correct, yes. This is right, the photo is taken right there from Gunter Street, which is that
Okay.
first cross street, and it will go underground before you get to Gunter right there.
That's Mejor que Nada on the
Correct.
far right.
Right, across Bryant over there is Mejor que Nada. On timeline on this, hope to have design complete in about a month from now, which allows us to start advertising for bid in early November. We could then open the bids and award it a month later from that in early December, and hopefully start construction in mid to late December. Might have to push it till January just to get a new start on it, but late summerish, early fall is project completion, is what our expected timeline is from now.
Tim? Or Clinton, were there any discussions about stormwater capture, that this may be an opportunity to think about it?
There is a regional pond supposed to go in the Red Arroyo right downstream of this.
Okay.
So this would flow directly into that.
Okay, so, okay.
There's basically no room in this section of the project to capture this amount of flow, because it is quite a bit of flow.
Okay.
The pond is the one that Stephen Brown talked about, the idea of that? Is that what we're talking about?
You want into that?
I believe so, and what we're looking at here with this project is being able to intercept about a 4-inch rainfall event. And just to put it into perspective, that's about 700 cubic feet a second of water, or about 10 times the amount that's flowing through the equalization channel currently from the pumps out of the South Pool,
Wow.
just to kind of put it into perspective.
We'd capture it anyway, so I can see why. I see what you're saying. This just more efficiently gets it through the neighborhood.
Right.
Okay, other questions? I'm trying to watch you guys.
I have a question.
Well, you-
How, Tim or Clint, how are we doing as far as the AEP, utility lines, Verizon, whatever's out there? What's
AEP is all above ground. There are, I believe, 2 Verizon crossings underground and 3 gas crossings. This will all be underneath it. There are 5, I guess, sewer crossings, and this will be below most of them.
So then you
it'll be
have-
pretty deep.
So then you have, and I'm just guessing, Ben Ficklin, Hill Street, Irving. how is that going to impact? I mean, are we going to have to shut down a street at a time, or what's the idea?
We'll work the construction phasing so that all the residents have access, so that emergency access is still available through that area. On those intersections, we'll try to get through those as quickly as possible. Additionally, we're working with the property owner across South Chadbourne right now to secure that easement. Mr. Dane and I met with an adjacent business owner and had talks about putting this system through there, and they're looking at purchasing the land. So we've made that contact. We're working through that process as well right now, and we'll be concluding that fairly soon. But we'll have to phase the construction such that we have minimal impact to the traveling public and those residents. This is a large underground culvert, and we're going to have some disruptions.
Sure.
Be a large hole in the ground, but we're going to try to minimize that and work with the residents directly as much as possible.
How deep would that hole be?
Well, it could be upwards. Right now we're looking at the bottom of it somewhere in the 10 to 12 foot range in places.
Other questions? Thank you for the update. I appreciate it. Okay, it is right at 10 o'clock. We're about to get into several items that are planning related with Planning Manager A.J. Favre. So how about a short break now, and then we can stick with all of those.
Just as a note, you may want to remind those, some may have walked in late, about the water.
Yes, sir.
When we're going to hit
Thank
that.
you. Mr. Hurstfeld is referring to the fact that right before the meeting started, we made sure to announce that the item concerning water and the Stage 3 drought item will be discussed at length after lunch. So we think we'll start on that discussion roughly at 1:30. If you've come in after that announcement, you feel free to go and come back after lunch. Obviously, you're welcome to be here for every item, but we just want to make sure you're not sitting there all morning waiting for something that's not going to happen until after lunch. Thank you. We're going to take a break at this time, and we'll reconvene in about 15 minutes. Call the meeting back to order and start with item number 14. This is the first public hearing and consideration of introduction of an ordinance amending the standards for visual clearance on corner lots. Presentation by Planning Manager A.J. Favre.
Good morning. The request before you now is an amendment that's being proposed to the section of the zoning ordinance in Chapter 5 that refers to and establishes a vision clearance triangle. On the first slide here, I have an illustration of what that vision clearance triangle refers to, and in our ordinance, it is established in Article 510 as a 30-foot minimum distance measured from the intersection of two street-side property lines. And the purpose of this visual clearance triangle is to, of course, provide the appropriate visibility for both motorists and pedestrian activity approaching an intersection. It helps enhance the safety of both of these types of traffic and to reduce the points of conflict at key intersections. And it also allows visibility and the availability to determine stopping distance or maneuvering techniques based on what the motorist is seeing as they approach that intersection. So it's a very important standard that we have, and it's one that we maintain that should be kept in our ordinance, with one exception that we're here to discuss with you today. And that discussion is an exception in the Central Business District, which is located in the downtown sector of our city. Here on the slide, we have an excerpt of the chart from Section 502 of the zoning ordinance that establishes all of the numerical standards for each commercial zoning district in the city. And if you'll notice, the Central Business District in this chart is exempt from the requirement for a minimum front yard, and in most cases also from the requirement for a minimum side or rear yard. The background memo talks a little bit about the history behind this and the technique of historic downtown buildings as being the type of buildings that you see built to the street. These are usually in areas that are, again, older in nature, have a proliferation of sidewalks, and have more pedestrian activity than maybe other parts of the city. And as such, our ordinance does, again, currently allow an exemption in this Central Business District zoning area from that minimum front yard. However, our zoning ordinance does go on in Section 510 to then require a vision clearance triangle for these same properties. As you know, the downtown area of our city is very largely developed, and so we don't have a proliferation of construction and infill development. But recently, we have had a couple of projects that we have discussed with individuals in the city for building new buildings in the downtown area, and so it is now that this has been brought to our attention. We do recognize the importance of vision clearance triangles, and again, we are not suggesting that these be entirely exempted from the central business district, but rather what we have come up with in discussions of looking at the downtown area, looking at some of the key intersections in downtown, and looking at some of the signalized intersections, is coming up with some criteria through which we could exempt certain intersections and certain corner lots from maintaining this vision clearance triangle and allow them to build in a way that matches the rest of the downtown area. And that way they enjoy the same type of development that these other individuals have enjoyed in the past when they've built these buildings. The slide that I've brought up here is one of the intersections in downtown. This is at Chadburn and Concho Street, and this is an intersection that has both sidewalks in place and is a signalized intersection. And so you can see that with the sidewalks in place, there is still some ability for vision clearance where you can see oncoming traffic. It is somewhat restricted as opposed to an intersection where that vision clearance triangle is met and that building is backed 30 feet off of this intersection. However, because it's also a signalized intersection, the motorists and pedestrians traveling through these intersections don't have the type of control that you would have in a non-signalized intersection. They are told when to move forward and proceed into traffic and when to stop and wait.
Hey, Jake, back
Yes.
to that intersection. Please tell me you're not going to propose we cut down those trees.
No, sir.
Okay.
No,
good.
the trees
I
are
love
trees are not
trees.
part of it. Trees are great, and they
Thank
can
you.
stay. This is another intersection you may be familiar with at the corner of Konigheim and Washington Street. And in this location, you do have a building that is built completely to the property line. And if you know from going through this intersection, you know that without that signal in place, you'd have a very difficult time seeing oncoming traffic coming down Washington Street as you're sitting on Konigheim Street. So again, the signalized intersection is particularly important for these areas where the visual clearance is lessened as opposed to other types of intersections. And so as we studied the downtown area, there are 46 intersections in this central business district zoning area, 21 of which are signalized. As I mentioned earlier, there are also a great number of sidewalks which are in this area. Sidewalks are important to us in looking at this analysis because, again, they help hold the line and preserve a buffer between the street edge and the buildings that are being built at that location. So the exception that we have worded with the assistance of our legal staff is to allow an exemption for corner lots that are at signalized intersections only. We don't feel that it would be a safe thing to allow at a non-signalized intersection, and that have unobstructed sidewalks at least 4 feet in width between the street edge and the proposed building along the two street property lines for a distance of at least 30 feet from the intersection. If approved, this would allow individuals to come forward to the city and looking at building infill development and that sort of development in the downtown area. And if they meet the criteria of being at a signalized intersection where we have a way to control the traffic and the stop and flow, and they also have the sidewalks that are at least 4 feet in width that are between the building and the street, again, maintaining that buffer that allows the vision to go across the sidewalk. We don't allow those sidewalks to be obstructed. We would allow an exception for those individuals. Again, this would affect 21 intersections of the 46 intersections in the downtown area and would allow this infill development to match very closely the type of development that is already in the downtown area. And so with that, I will open it up for any questions that you may have.
So you're talking about the central business district only?
Only.
Only.
It is the only zoning district where we already exempt them from a front setback.
All right, so if I were to open the central, the streetscape plan and look at it, and if I had the dimensions on it, would it fit this criteria? Would it work? If you start putting bushes, I know they've changed it, but if there were still the potted plant areas and they were sticking up, would it still fit?
Right. The height and the location of items that are above 3 feet tall are located in such a way that the visibility is still maintained.
Okay.
The 4-foot number is a concern to me. So
We just came up with the 4 feet because that seems to be a standard width for sidewalks. All sidewalks must be at least 36 inches or 3 feet wide for ADA standards, but 4 feet seems to be a number that seems to be an industry standard for sidewalk widths.
Okay. But, so, does that mean, though, a building could be as close as 4 feet to the, to the corner? I guess I'm sitting here closing my eyes and thinking of Fuentes, thinking of Myers Drug, thinking of different corners. I don't think any of them only have a 4-foot sidewalk.
Most of them have much wider sidewalks than that. In the case of a new business coming in, we would require them to, if they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity, put that sidewalk in. However, again, we're fortunate in this district in that most of the sidewalks are already in place.
That's what I'm
But it's
saying.
4 feet.
Well, it takes 5 feet for 2 people to walk side by side down a sidewalk. Otherwise, it's strained. So it really takes 5 feet.
And you can certainly alter that width, that's fine.
That's from building houses. I mean, I've learned that in architecture school. So even that's and that's very close to the street, but it's 1 more foot. And that's what it takes for 2 people to pass safely by each other with traffic next to them and things like that.
And so it sounds like that's an item for discussion that you may want to actually alter the number for.
Well, for me, it
You want it
seems
much
like-
larger.
I want it to be larger than 4 feet.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like the concept.
Sure.
I'm supportive. I just am not sure I like the
I think we
4 foot
took maybe the
number.
least restrictive
Okay. I'm not sure I
Well,
like a 4
tack
foot
forward,
number.
but most of the sidewalks in the downtown area actually measure between 10 and 15 feet, so they're very, very wide.
I'm trying to visualize the 41 intersections that you're talking about. I don't see any that would be less than that. I mean, am I?
Well, of the 46, only 21 are actually signalized, so those would be the only ones meeting the criteria of having a signalized intersection. And then within those 21, a requirement for sidewalks would be in place. And just in looking at aerial photographs, which is somewhat difficult in some of the areas, it appears that almost all of the 21 intersections currently have sidewalks in place.
But I mean, a fair amount of this is discussion about what the setback would be if someone wanted to build toward that corner.
Correct, and the argument that we're hearing is
So what
that
you see
there seems to be
now-
some bit of contradiction between you don't have a front setback, but then you require me to have a visual clearance triangle.
Okay, but I'm simply saying, there may not be one in place now,
Okay.
but it could become in place if depending on what we require. And again, I'm supportive of the concept. I'd just like to see us require more than 4 feet from the building to the street in the process, so.
The Spur building may be a building that could not be built. There's an overhang. If you look it up on Google, there's an overhang. It's within 4 feet of the street. I'm just trying to find examples.
Is it down at the floor,
It's just
is
one-
it at ground level or is it above ground
No,
level?
it's columns that hold up an overhang.
Okay.
They're pretty thick, and I don't think they would work under this new ordinance if it was being built. That's one example.
Are you talking about even businesses making changes or adding something to the front of their entryway, for example, to kind of block the vision, or?
That could apply. I would imagine that most of those entrances are probably not at the corner of the building, but they certainly could be, and it would apply to them as well.
So I can go out there and add a big old sign out there that would block that.
It wouldn't so
what
much
you're
be a
done.
sign.
Right.
But-
You're thinking an awning, an overhang,
Right,
something of that
absolutely.
nature. Yes, it would have to meet the same requirements.
Well, I guess just thinking of one building, I mean, I'm drawing a blank. Brenda mentioned it, the old hotel.
Roosevelt?
The Roosevelt.
Yeah, that they bought. I mean, on the side access, I guess that's on Campus Street. I mean, is that?
That building's actually built all the way to the property line. It does have sidewalks on both sides.
But one is narrow, isn't it?
One is narrower than the other, but the narrower one, I believe, was measured at 7 feet, and the wider one was closer to 10.
Okay, well, let's just take the opposite side of that. And again, I just want to, we've got Western Printing over there. They've got, that's a narrow, they're built up to that, and it's a very, very short, narrow sidewalk, correct?
Correct, but
I
it is
mean,
over 4 feet.
And I guess I don't want to, I'm a little worried what's going to happen right there if and when they do something different on that building.
Right. We weren't able to find any examples of where the 4-foot limitation would affect anyone in the downtown area.
So you think that that's at least 4 foot right there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. That's the narrowest one that I'm really
Yes,
familiar with.
and we tried specifically to make sure that we weren't overlooking anything that would be a problem later.
And that's my only concern. I'm not in disagreement with the 5 foot. I just don't want to create a hindrance on
On an existing
on
location.
existing property for future development on that.
Sure.
Well, even the weren't able to find is a key statement right there, because
Right.
if you know of one, I sure can't picture it.
Right, and again, we just utilized the aerial photographs in doing so and measured, but we weren't able to find any.
But this is going to also keep trees from being planted within 30 feet of a corner, because a tree is taller than 4 feet. It does block view.
Correct.
That's what it's going to do. But what they'll do is they'll place the tree 4 feet away from the curb right now. That's what they'll do. And so I'm saying, well, for two people to walk by each other, you need 5 feet. Then the tree grows a bit, and I guess they need to take that into consideration. But, I mean, we can't go under 5. I think 5 has to be, but you want bigger numbers.
I want a bigger number.
And
What I would like to see you do, even in light of what, and especially in light of what Mr. Hersfeld said, well, it's 21 intersections. What I'd like the ordinance to be is as wide as the smallest existing sidewalk measurement is. You talked about Western.
Yeah, Western's
I mean,
Western
if that's-
Printing.
You know, if that's 6 feet, let's make sure we go at least to 6 feet. And, I mean, that would be my perspective. I don't want to hurt anyone that's in an existing environment, but I'd like not to let it be any smaller than currently exists, or something
Okay.
along those lines myself, because to me, it's the safest thing to do. It doesn't hurt anybody, and it allows for us to get people on the sidewalks by each other and so forth. Anyway, that's my own perspective. Doesn't mean it's the right perspective. That would be mine, that let's not hurt anybody, but let's be as wide as
Okay.
is currently in place.
We can study that between now and the next meeting, and for your second reading, have that specific number for you.
So AJ, this ordinance applies to everybody else,
This applies to everyone within the central business district.
but I'm talking about outside. I saw some other districts that
Not in other,
residential.
not in other districts,
it was
because
just-
all other zoning districts have required minimum setbacks.
It would
and
only
this
be
is
the
the
central
one
business
exception.
district, and it would only be the 21 signalized intersections.
Correct.
And what brought this up?
Again, we've had a couple of projects that have visited with us about maybe some infill development, and it seemed to be a contradiction in terms to them that we did not require them to have a setback, but then we did require them to have a setback from the intersection.
Mr. Morrison?
Did you run this by the Downtown Association?
We have not, no.
I think that ought to be the first thing you do, is to get their input on this. They're the ones that's affected by this.
We can do that also before the
I'd,
second
I'd,
reading.
I'd make a motion to put this off until you get some good figures and get their input on this as well. They're the ones that
Okay.
will be affected.
Okay, so your motion is,
Put this off until we get a setback. I don't have a problem with the 4 foot. I think it's fine. 4 foot is great, but if you want to get a minimum of what we've got, that's neither here nor there. I wouldn't want to make an ordinance today and vote on something that's going to be restrictive that they are opposed to, and I think the people that work and live and have the property down there ought to be consulted and have a say-so in this. So I would say let's put this off until you have spoke to them, until you get their approval on it, and get some firm numbers, and then bring it back and we can vote on it. That would be my motion.
Sorry, just ran from upstairs. We did, before Janora Young left, we did discuss this, and Downtown San Angelo is supportive.
it's still really just a motion to table.
Yes, it's a motion to table. I mean, one says that they were not consulted, one says they were consulted.
I understand.
You know, I'd like to have some clarification on it.
The setback at Western Printing is going to be around 6 feet.
Okay,
I'm measuring it on,
I understand, and that'd be great. So then my number would be 6 feet.
okay.
You know, but-
And AJ, it's not a time sensitive.
Well, we're trying to get this taken care of ahead of the timeline for this particular project. So they are asking us to move forward on this rather quickly.
Will it impact that project?
Yes. This decision will impact that project because they are planning on building to the property lines, and it is in a signalized intersection with the
Okay,
appropriate sidewalk.
at the moment, Mr. Morrison doesn't have a second. Would somebody like to put in a different motion forward, or where are we?
Well, Sean, if you're making the point that you did visit with downtown and they're okay, did you, I mean, AJ
Yes,
didn't
AJ
know.
is not the liaison
Right,
to the
right.
Downtown Central Angelo Board, so I do fill that role. And yes, I did talk to Janora Young about that. In addition, the president of Downtown San Angelo is on the board of the property owner that is looking at building the project that will be held up by this.
Okay.
So she's
So why don't-
very, very aware of the project.
I'll make a motion to approve with a change from 4 feet to 6 feet, as is with one change, 4 feet to 6 feet.
Okay, I'm going to second his motion.
And I've got one last question. Sean, when you talk to downtown, does that mean they in turn talk to all the business owners downtown, or what does that mean?
No, sir, not necessarily. We simply forward information about what we're doing in downtown to Downtown San Angelo, either through the board chair or the the executive director. So it's really their kind of decision at that point on how they distribute that information to their membership and to downtown business owners.
Okay. Part of the reason I'm seconding this is to allow the project that's in place to be moved forward. And I'm trying to be very consistent with what's there for Western Printing, not do anything more restrictive than that, but also to allow as much visual access as possible and the ability to get people by on the sidewalks. So I know from retail background that 4 feet is not enough.
Right.
So I'm definitely would want more than 4, and so that's what I'm trying to do.
I'm just really concerned that I mean, we're kind of guessing, and you're looking at Google and doing that, and that's what I don't like. I mean, if someone wants to run out there with a tape measure and see I just don't want to hurt an existing building that's there. I mean, that's my take on this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I can support 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot. I just don't want to hurt
What if it's
anything
5
that's there.
foot, 11 inches? Hey, it's a little over 6, but that's a real estimation. If somebody just go run and measure.
You're talking
come
about
back-
that side street,
Oh, no,
you know,
no,
the
no.
college
Just
avenue.
Just make a motion that it is not less than the existing, it's 6 feet, or not less than an existing
Is that already,
On-
I assume that was already.
on the 21 intersections.
The case, that if it's
I
already
can support
there,
that.
if it's already there, it's unaffected. You want me to do that?
No, I said if you would make a motion that it is 6 feet or not less than any existing building on the 21 intersections,
Okay.
you've covered it. I mean, you
Okay.
don't hurt Western, you don't hurt anybody.
I changed my motion, Alicia, to 6 feet or not less than what is already existing as of this date.
Not more than, not less than.
Is it
Not more than.
Not more than?
Yeah, it's not more than. Or not more than any existing building on the 21 intersections in question. Then you don't hurt,
Is that the right language?
you can't hurt Western, you can't.
Right.
Are you tracking with that?
Yes, we are, and AJ's pointing out, we can get that number for the second reading, but I would want to point out that
Right.
staff has been as liberal as possible, as pro-business as possible with the small number. If we go with a larger number, that limits the number of people who can take advantage of this, and I just want to make sure that that's clear.
I think I'm clear on that.
Okay,
I just,
perfect.
I don't
4
want
feet's
our
not
buildings
enough.
to set it up where our sidewalks in downtown, I mean, your idea is that you're going to move people on foot around downtown. I don't want to put a sidewalk in place where people have to
Right.
I don't think that makes sense. Mr. Morrison?
And I would like for you to go to the Downtown Association, the whole group, and not a director that has left, and present this to the group and get a majority vote to be sure that the Downtown Association approves of this. Because they are the ones that are affected by this. They're the ones with the investment.
Well, you still would have that opportunity at a second reading?
Second reading, they can review it.
Anyway, Paul, you made a motion. I'm going to
And more
second
than's
that
correct.
motion. Is there further discussion up here? Is there public input on this item? Let's go ahead and call for that vote.
Just clarify the motion,
Yes.
please.
The motion is that, the ordinance or the proposal be accepted as presented, with the exception of changing the 4-foot number to a 6-foot number, or a number not to be larger than any existing building currently on one of these 21 intersections. So in other words,
Might
if
be
it's
larger
5
or
feet and
less.
10 inches, then that's the number, because we're not gonna make them go to 6 feet.
As of
So-
today's date, and Western Printing
Okay,
needs to be
okay.
measured
Okay.
to determine what that is.
So no one would be hurt in this process.
That's all I
I
want.
guess that's
Okay.
how, I guess you can create an
I'll
ordinance
call
like
for that vote then. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Get us a number and let's go from there, make sure we don't hurt anybody. And I think they'll be able to do that for the second read. Okay, let's move to item number 15.
On this item, we're asking the council for permission to enter into a contract with the Gateway Planning Group for the Lake Nasworthy Plan. My presentation is very brief. It's simply a chronology of where we've been with this project and where we have left to go. Starting in December, we had a review committee that was formed to review the submissions from the different consulting groups for the RFQ asking for a plan for Lake Nasworthy. And that process continued through January and February when the council gave permission to staff to enter into negotiations with this group. In the months of March and April, staff and the consultant put together a finalized scope, refined that, and negotiated it. And then you may remember in May, I believe it was May 15th, myself and Scott Polikoff from Gateway Planning came forward and presented that scope to all of you, as well as the figures for the scope that was presented. The committee, the selection committee that is, did recommend to council to approve the scope. And at that same meeting in May, the council did direct staff to move forward with the project and put together a contract. We have since done so. That contract has undergone review by our legal staff. It has been approved, and it's also been signed by the consultant. To remind you, the final figure on that contract was $298,150 plus expenses. You did suggest to us in that meeting that those expenses be capped, and so the consultant did work with our legal staff to write in a cap for the expenses at 12.5%. That project is again planned to be funded from the Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund.
AJ, could I interrupt right there,
Yes.
please? I want to clarify that this is not from the trust fund, but from investment proceeds in excess of what has been spent from those investment proceeds. Legally, we can't spend the trust fund itself without going to the voters. And so the clarity here is you're not spending trust fund money. The city is not proposing to spend the actual trust money, but investment proceeds which have accumulated beyond what has actually been spent from those proceeds. So this is money which is allowed to be spent from this source. Thank you.
That was very well articulated. And so, yes, at this time, we have that approved contract, and we are simply asking the council for approval for the city manager as designee to sign and execute that contract.
Okay, Mr. Morrison?
When I first heard about this and the presentation was made that we were going to spend in the excess of $300,000 of Lake Board interest funds to fund this study, I thought that it was a very serious waste of Lake Board interest funds money. Since that time, I have received calls from about a dozen lake residents, and they fear that their property values are going to rise to the point that they won't even be able to maintain their residences. And they have told me, everyone, that they think that this is a serious waste of Lake Board interest funds. So I will stay with my original. I will not support this. I do not think it's a good use and a choice of money. And the residents that live at the lake have told me the same.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, the $300,000 is a concern for some residents. That's
$335,000.
that is interest money, pretty much. It's investment proceeds, and it's a lot of money. It will raise their property values because it will raise the activity at the lake. It'll raise, commercial investors will be able to invest on parts of the lake. It will be more desirable to live at Lake Nasworthy, and because of that, property values will go up. That's what I think our job is as a council, is to maintain property values or increase property values by increasing the desirability. It also falls in line with our vision statement In 15 years, 2027 will be the most desirable mid-sized city in the state of Texas. So it fits our vision. If we're concerned about the $300,000, let me suggest that we move the Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund to something like the Health Foundation. It would take a vote from the voters, approval from the voters. If you move it to the Health Foundation, $12 million generates, maybe we'd move part of it, but we can generate $300,000 extra dollars a year very easily. So if we're concerned that we're not spending our money right, let's be concerned about how we're investing our money and make that money back within a year. And then there's also boat ramps that my constituents are asking me. They're saying, Paul, the lake is down right now. Let's fix those boat ramps, take some of that interest. And they're saying don't spend it on Gateway, but we have more money sitting in there. I would say you're right. We do need to fix those boat ramps, maybe spend $300,000 on those boat ramps while the lake is down. There are also rocks that are starting to surface. They can be marked right now while the lake is down. There's things we can do and spend some of that money from that fund to help out the lake. And so it is a related subject. I think, though, that the value of this Gateway planning is tremendous, and that we would be visionless to say no to it.
Okay, I want to add to something Mr. Alexander just said. The fact is, when property values go up, that's a good thing. Property taxes is what folks are concerned about.
Right.
And the broader your tax base is, the more you have flexibility to lower the tax rate. And you don't pay more taxes if your property's worth more, but your tax rate is less. And so that's the thing that we need to be careful of here. Of course, you're going to try to improve the value of properties by bringing in more jobs, by bringing in more investment, by bringing in more companies and more activity. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hurt those people in that process.
We're doing the same thing in downtown San Angelo right now. We're increasing property values. We're incentivizing and planning, and it's the same thing. And it's what you have to do to help our city.
Okay. Is there other input from council on this item?
I did have a question on clarification on the funding, and Michael, you just explained, but explain it to me again. It's not the trust fund money we're touching.
Good. That's a good point. The trust fund earns interest, and I'll come back to that. Paul made a good point about the limited ability to earn interest because of state restrictions on what we can invest in. Earns interest, and 90% of that interest can be used for maintenance in accordance with certain restrictions. To the extent that that 90% has exceeded what has actually been used, we have gathered that money and placed it in a reserve in the water fund. So that money is set aside. It's available for spending in accordance with those restrictions, and we've set that money aside. The actual trust money we cannot spend, and so that money still resides in a separate Lake Nasworthy fund. But this is from those excess, that surplus of earnings over expenditures.
And you have, where is it? In what, a water fund, but where? Where am I going to see it?
It's in the water operating fund in a reserved fund balance area. And it's actually not in that book you're looking at.
And what is that balance, reserve fund balance?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. When we first set it aside, Morgan, do you know that answer?
The City Council approved a budget amendment in a prior fiscal year, I believe it was in 2011, to take $865,000 out of the Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund.
No.
Sorry.
No, we did not take any money out of the trust fund.
Sorry. The earnings in excess of the trust fund. And that was allowable expenses that could be taken out of the trust fund and you trust earnings and used for improvements at the lake.
Well, I was just going to say that earnings, interest or not, to me, interest from that fund, from that lake fund, is still lake money. That's the way I'm interpreting it. But you're looking at $11 million balance right now on that.
This money is coming from another account, some excess earnings that $11 million earned. In other words, that $11 million we invest, and it generates interest or investment income, and for example, if it earns $100, 90 of those $100 can be spent for maintenance and capital issues associated with lakes and river systems. That's an oversimplification. The ordinance specifies much better than that. But of that $90, in the past, we have not spent all of that $90. If we only spent 80, then there's $10 left, which still can be spent. What we've done is gathered those little pieces and put them aside because we knew, this was a couple of years ago, when there was beginning to be a push for, let's, however you would characterize that push, to more effectively utilize a city asset or an asset within our community. We knew that there were going to be expenditures that needed to go with that, and if we did not set those monies aside, they would be lost and remain in the trust fund, and they could not be recovered and utilized for those expenditures. And we'd be looking at spending money from water operating or from general fund or something like that instead of this legal use of these investment earnings.
So my question again is, Morgan or somebody, what is the balance in that?
I got it. I found it. The beginning balance.
865.
I got to. Okay, the trust fund has $11,596,000. So $11.6 million. I'm looking for
About
the interest.
Okay.
$865,000 was moved out of the trust earnings into an operating fund so we could spend it on improvements. About, I believe, $125,000 has been spent to date on boat ramps and items that were approved by the council out at the lake. And the remainder is still available for allowable expenses.
So 700,000 and change.
Correct.
Because I don't even remember that conversation from the last time, you know.
It was a
about
prior
us
fiscal year
using- about us using this interest excess fund. I don't remember that. So now you're bringing it up. I kind of was teeter-tottering on the fence about using this amount of money for this gateway. But I'm speechless. I don't remember that first conversation about it being.
Well, we went through a lot of this information during different discussions about the hillside issue and where money could come from on that, and we talked about Mary Lee Park and whether there would be any type of development there. And so, I mean, we have had the discussions. It doesn't, we discuss a lot of things, so it's not remarkable that something would be hard to remember. Mr. Morrison.
One of the further comments these lake residents told me when we talked, they said if we've got that kind of money that we can spend in this fund, then let's get rid of the salt cedar and let's get rid of the mesquite and let's clean that lake out since things are low. Let's use this money in a way that it will benefit the whole city instead of sending $335,000 to a company in Fort Worth that's going to make us a pretty little book. And I agree with that. If we've got money to spend in that lake fund, let's use it on the lake for the benefit of the entire city. And this $335,000 as a study is not good for the benefit of the city.
This is not a study. This is zoning. There are 5 people that have wanted to spend $1 million or more on that lake that have come to me, and all 5 are not successful. All 5 can't do it because the zoning is bizarre. It's parks, and they want to know if I put my building here, what's going to be next to them, and I don't know that because it's not zoned. It hasn't been thought out. The rest of San Angelo has been vision planned, zoned, and this has not been planned. Okay, this is the only part we haven't planned. It needs to be completed, and it's just something we have to do as a city. This particular group, Gateway, knows how to do it in such a way that we can maximize tourism, commercial development. They're very good at that stuff, and our next agenda item, in fact, is going to be looking at downtown San Angelo, what they can do for downtown. So we have to do this. Let's just do it right. The part of doing it right probably costs us about $150,000 versus just kind of doing it halfway so that we did it. We want to be an exceptional city, and I think this is what we need to do.
Okay, Ms. Farmer.
I think it's clear and obvious that if you drive around out at the lake and the way things are laid out, it's kind of squirrely and it's kind of crazy, and you deal with the lay of the land and the water and the levels and the commercial and the residential, and it's pretty squirrely out there. And we have an absolute pearl with the lake being at the city, but it needs to be developed properly. If you look at other developments and zones in the city, they're developed properly by professionals who take everything into consideration. And for the last 50 years, what we have done out at the lake, and I'm not slamming the staff or the planning department, I am not. But it has been done as requests come up to let this person do that and this person do something different, and we have a squirrely development sitting out there. But to meet all of the regulations, water conservation issues and development issues, we need to have the professionals lay this out, and let's go about it properly. That's what the money is for, is to the benefit out there, the interest earnings to be spent for the benefit out at the lake, and we need the professionals to do this.
Okay. Do we have public input on this item?
My name's Jim Turner. Just a little bit of historical clarification. Any changes you make to this fund, and you're using it properly here, but any changes you make to this fund have to go back before the voters. This is part of the city charter. This Lake Nasworthy Fund was updated not long ago so that we can do better investments, but even there, we're limited to those investments that are rock solid, safe, and can guarantee that we have a trust fund going forward. Second thing is, we do need to have a plan out there. The question is not whether we need a plan. The question today is this the best plan that's likely to come up? That's going to have to be something you decide, but you can't leave this just kind of sitting there waiting for somebody to come in on a kind of a piecemeal basis, deciding what to do with this area, that area, and the other. There may be a better way to do it. I don't know that. I know that staff and other people have been looking at this for a while. Some ways we've got a very late start on this, and we waited longer probably than we should have. This probably should have been looked at back during RUDAT, which is, 20 years ago now. And it was mentioned as part of that process. Nothing happened until recently. So, if nothing else, the planning is overdue. The question is not whether we need the planning. The question is whether or not this is the right planning to do that. And that's going to have to be your decision today. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public input?
Good morning, Council and Mayor. Bob Bankster. I'm just a little confused here. Later on this afternoon, we're going to have a discussion about water, Stage 3 restrictions. I've heard people complain who come that they're having trouble getting their boats in the water because of the low levels of the water, of the lake. Water's being released to get into the water system. And we're talking about spending $300,000 on a plan when we might not even have a lake if we don't get some substantial rain and put water back into our lakes and our reservoirs. So I don't.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I need a motion on this item so that we can move it forward.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve as presented. I'm going to get Mr. Silva.
I have one more comment. If we're going to fund this gateway through the interest funds, I mean, state it that way. Don't say to be funded from Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund. You know, that's what it says right there in black and white. So that's where I think my
yeah, I
confusion
need a clarification that the actual that is that the case that this
Well,
could come from?
Mr. Dane said it twice now. This
Okay.
would be the third time that he's saying.
That's it as presented.
Yeah.
I should say as presented with a
Attaboy.
clarification that this is coming from the investment account.
Investment
like that.
proceeds.
Okay, so I'm changing it
Investment
to make
proceeds
sure
from the
that-
trust fund.
And
Second.
Second. Okay.
one more question for clarification. Gateway is coming in, and we're going to pay them $335,000, and they're going to give us what?
Okay. What this is about, Ms. Favre, in the previous discussions back in May, said that our planning department has ideas about how to do this, but does not feel that this is in their wheelhouse. This is not something they want to put the plan together for, and so they looked for organizations that have done this in other communities and created a development process for bodies of water. So that could either be a river area. There's the area in Oklahoma City, for instance, that was produced by this group. And so what they did then was come back and say, we're going to bring these groups in, interview them, and through a committee process decide which one seems to make sense to help us develop the lake where we have commercial areas. So that, for instance, where that electric plant is being is being taken apart and sold off, and that's been annexed into the city, and it fronts on Knickerbocker. What's the best way to develop all of that part of that new part of the city? And then what do we do with the parks that are there now and the park plan that's been put in place? How does that roll into this? What do we do for the residents? What do we do for the commercial development, and where should that commercial development be? So it would be then a project of, here's what your zoning ought to be. Here's where different parts of the area should be zoned commercial. Here's where different parts should be zoned residential. Here's how your transitions ought to take place. All the kinds of things that we do in comprehensive planning, and all of the kinds of things we do in our zoning processes, to say then let's now go out and remember, this was a big part of this. Why we chose this company. They have the relationships with developers from other communities and other projects to make sure that we don't only have some idea of what the plan is, but we have the relationships to bring that developer to this community, so that we start with the opportunity to do some things on the lake that make it more economically integral to what the city does. We have two jewels here. One is the river downtown, and we're doing all the right things with the river. The other one is the lake. We're not doing anything differently on the lake than what we've done for 50 years. This is trying to move the lake process forward correctly and bring in those relationships so that we end up with something that helps us economically to be developed and helps us continue to be the place people want to come from Central and West Texas, and that's what this is about.
And there's one thing I'll add. This process will have a high amount of resident
well, no, it has a high amount of public input.
Public input.
So it's not just residents out there, it's public input. What do you want this to be?
There's the walking trail, the issues there. There's the horseshoe. There's people live all over that lake. They all have different issues, and there's people from within the city that want to talk. They're going to be talking to us. That the planning process will involve our citizens, and there was even a plan that put forth that it was one meeting. I said no. We're not going to have one meeting. We're going to have lots of meetings so we get this right. So that's why it's an expensive plan, because we want to do this right. We want everybody's input. And the people on Joy Road, they have thoughts. We want to know what those thoughts are. How do we integrate with Joy Road over by the beach? How do we do that? This company can do it for us.
Need to let Mr. Silvas have this back, and then I'm going to call for the vote.
I would just want to be reminded of what they were bringing to the table.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to approve this as presented, with the one caveat that it's clear that the funds to be spent are from the investment proceeds from the Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund. And so at this point, I'll call for that vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
I'm going to oppose it.
Okay, we're 4-2 on this vote. At this time, I'd like to go to item number 16. This is the discussion, update, and presentation regarding the status of the Downtown Master Developer. Presentation by our planning manager, A.J. Favre.
I believe we had a couple of council members ask for an update on where we are with the master developer, so I've prepared a very short report for you, and also just a line of chronology as to where we started and where we are at this point in the process. You may recall back in October of last year, the Downtown Development Commission was formulated and established by ordinance, which you passed. And in 2011, the end of that year in December, a draft plan for the downtown area, which is intended to augment the existing downtown chapter of the comprehensive plan, was compiled by staff and presented to the Downtown Development Commission. We also had a public meeting to present this to the public. In January of this year, the Downtown Development Commission asked staff to proceed with developing a draft scope of services for an RFQ that would be published. The Downtown Development Commission reviewed what staff had prepared in February, and in April that RFQ was published with a due date of June 7th. The week of June 7th, we discovered that only one submission had been received, and so we did extend that deadline to June 21st. I will mention that we sent out 32 packets to specific companies that had had experience in the master developer concept, as well as published it on a number of websites that consultants routinely pull RFQ and RFP requests from. That deadline again was extended to June 21st, and at the 26th meeting of the Downtown Development Commission, we distributed the submission information that was received, and the DDC set a date of August 28th. That date was set for their next regular meeting and also for an interview of that submission, the 3 consulting firms that together put together that submission. On October 28th, the Downtown Development Commission did interview that consultant group. It was a very lengthy, very lively discussion, and at the end of that discussion, they did make a recommendation that this group be selected for the task as master developer. On September 25th, approximately, staff will begin discussion with the DDC to propose and refine a final scope of services. And at that point, once we have a final scope of services, that can be priced out and negotiations can begin.
Council, if I could add, it was concerning that we had only one response, but rather than throw it all out, the group decided to go ahead and meet with the proposal, the people who had submitted the proposal. And I guess I could characterize that as a very positive exchange. I think that Downtown Development Commission felt very good about the proposal, and that's why they directed staff to make some progress. Really, in summation, what I'd say is we're trying to work up a scope and a price tag so that we've got a package that group can make a recommendation on and bring to council for consideration. And while it's never moves as fast as everybody would like, right now I think that the commission feels like they're in a good spot with this proposal. And the question is, can we tie up some loose ends and bring a nice package to council that the council can be on board with?
Yes.
Ms. Farmer?
Could you, AJ, tell me what the vote was, the DDC, on who they're recommending?
It was unanimous.
Thank you.
There's an obvious point, and I'm not sure why it's not being brought up. The group that submitted is the same group that we just hired for Lake Nasworthy. They have a relationship with San Angelo, and I think they can leverage the two possibly in the future. They're super smart. I didn't ever think that it'd be I thought a master developer would be one person. It's a group. And so it's quite different than I envisioned, but I see some synergy here. And so we're quite lucky that they submitted a proposal because they're a very talented group of people.
You're right. They did actually submit a package jointly with Catalyst Urban Development and NE Development, both of which also have San Angelo ties, and that was one of the recurring comments from the DDC members was they did like hearing from people that knew our community and seemed to have some knowledge of what it was that we needed here.
They did very well in their presentation.
Mr. Morrison?
My question would be, why do we need them? We heard Brenda Gunter's report just a while ago of the amount of building and buying and all of the wonderful things that's going on downtown. All you have to do is drive down through downtown at night to see the tremendous growth and things that have happened in the last 2 years. Why do we need somebody to come in and tell us what our local boys and girls are already doing? We know what we're doing. We're already doing it. We have success. We see it in our taxes. Why do we need to pay some group to come in from Fort Worth to tell us what to do when we are doing it already and are successful at it? Why?
Okay, Mr. Hirschfeld.
Okay, when y'all, they're going to go through all this process and they're going to bring us back and present to us what some of the deliverables they're going to bring to us. just roughly?
In this case, in the discussion with the Downtown Development Commission, there was a large chunk, I think, of the conversation was talking about investments, the techniques of having both horizontal and vertical development. And this group was very vocal in saying that they wanted to make sure that their involvement as a master developer would not preclude them from also investing in the downtown area. So part of their deliverables to us will be based on some of the data that they've already started collecting and presented to us at that meeting, really targeting the areas of downtown that need to be revitalized and trying to determine what is it that's keeping that from happening, how do we put together a package that will entice someone with the adequate financial backing to come in and actually do the project. How do you go from idea to reality, bridging that gap? And so they have established relationships with both lenders in the industry and also developers. And this group that they've put together is combined of not only planners, people with planning backgrounds, people with financing backgrounds who know how to go out and find money and grant monies, and also a group that is a construction-based group. So the three of those together sort of run the gamut from conceptualization to reality of a project. And so what we anticipate they will be bringing us largely is those types of projects. Where are the key projects, and helping us put together the package that would actually get someone to come in and break ground in a building that has maybe been largely vacant for years.
I think one of the keys that you said, and correct me if I heard this wrong, but they're going to be either hopefully bringing money, bringing people that have money, or finding, going out there and trying to solicit people that have money.
Correct.
Am I correct in
Yes,
that
you're
assumption?
correct in that
Or bring their own money.
Or bring their
that
own
was
money.
one of my
Okay,
threes.
that is
Yes. And so
exactly right.
So
and that's-
that to me is one of the keys that I think we're looking at. Is they're going to be going beyond the people that we know, that you know, that the
Right.
people out there know. Hopefully on the aspect of looking at some new money to come into this town. So, okay, thank you.
Mr. Silvas?
AJ, I guess the question I had, and I too from the very beginning assumed that a master developer, like Paul said, I thought it was a one person, but now I find out it's a group. But financial impact, none at this time. Expenditures will be part of the contract process. Do we have any idea what financial impact we're looking at?
You're asking my questions. That's what I'm trying to
Okay.
plan for these kind of expenditures. And what I'm being told, I have the same kind of questions. What's going to be delivered, and what are we going to have to pay for it? And as kind of an outsider from a planning perspective, I have those questions, and it really depends on what it is we want. And so that's where we are now. If we were to make this presentation today, we'd say, well, that depends on what you want. What scope do you want? So we're working with them, going to be having discussions with them to determine what is it we want the master developer to do for us, and what will that require us to bring to the table in the form of financial or other consideration. So we don't know yet, but that is an issue for us, and that's, in my mind, that's something we have to have worked out before this comes back as a recommendation.
And again, it says the staff will begin discussion with the Downtown Development Commission to propose and refine a final scope of services and to discuss pricing. So the committee's not through doing its work before it comes back to us.
Can we throw this price idea into the mix with the Lake Nasworthy, what they're doing out there? I'm just throwing that out. I'm just kidding.
What do you mean by throw it in the mix?
Well, we're paying them $335,000. Could we not add this to that price?
Well, I think for clarity's sake, AJ, help me if I go astray. This is the group doing the Nasworthy work is one of 3 partners that have made a proposal for this master developer activity.
So they're not it's not a done deal that we're going with them, with Gateway.
Well, Gateway is one of 3 partners. The
Right.
partnership made a proposal, and Gateway brings again, I'm counting on guidance. Gateway brings the planning expertise.
Mhm.
There's one that, one of the partners has the master developer expertise.
Financing expertise.
And exactly, financing. And there's one partner that has the construction expertise.
Okay.
And Gateway will have a presence or a footprint in San Angelo through this other contract, The other two, one has family ties here, the other has actual projects on the ground here at this point. So there is, for two of the three, there are solid San Angelo connections. And really, what we pay and what we get is yet to be determined based on what the commission wants and what this partnership's expertise and interest lies in. And that's a concern for me, too. I don't want to see I'd like to see, I suggested $5,000 and everybody laughed, even my own folks. So I guess it's going to be more than $5,000. But we'll just have to see what it is they think the interests are. It could, I don't have a clue. It depends on what we want them to do, but it is a consideration.
I have one question.
Ms. Farmer?
With three different groups combining as one to oversee, to do this, the DDC, is there a contract, in the contract, the three different companies' responsibilities, and what happens if one of these companies drops out, goes belly up, goes elsewhere? How does that affect us? I just need some clarification.
Right. We're not yet in the stages of formulating a contract, but those responsibilities would be spelled out similar to the last item in which the contract we provided had the detailed scope of service. You would have the same sort of format for that.
Okay.
And they would all be contractually tied, the three of them, to the project.
Okay.
Mr. Hirschfeld?
I guess just want to, maybe my perception of that while there may be potentially some outlay right up front for the city in paying for some services, I mean, I guess my expectation is that, they're going to bring cash, and so it will, there can be returns to the city via sale of properties, the Edgewater property. It could be returns to the city, again, via, permits and fees and property tax increases, and not property tax, but the property value increases. I mean, so, there's a multitude of returns.
And a piece of land becoming something more than a piece of land is new property taxes.
That's correct. So anyway, that's just kind of my perception of how I see it. Now, with all that in mind, it needs to be, all, budgeted and properly paid for with a proper, again, coming back to this return on our investment. So, but that's what my expectations and hopes are when we get to the end product of this thing.
Okay, this is a discussion item. Are there further questions? Thank you very much. Let's move to item number 17. This is an update on the self-insurance fund and consideration of authorizing the health insurance premiums for the calendar year 2013. Presentation is by our Human Resources Director, Lisa Marley.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. What we wanted to do today was to give you an update on the self-insurance plan and how that has worked for us over the years. And there's a brief background that I'd like to share with you to start off with. If you recall last November, when we met with you about our self-insurance on the health program, you all awarded the Aetna exclusive provider option with Community as the in-network service for our plan. That option allowed us to reduce the premiums for last year, and that provided additional savings to the fund. At the last council meeting, there was a slide that was presented that showed a budget amendment that we had done earlier in the year, and there was a little bit of confusion about that, and I just thought I would address that while we're discussing this option. If you recall last year, when we did the budget, we had not finished the negotiations on the self-insurance plan, and so we had budgeted based on the $16.50 premium that we had the year previous. When we were able to go with the EPO, and we were able to reduce those premiums to $13.20. So it was incumbent on us to do a budget amendment to show that we would have less revenue coming in than we originally thought. Whenever revenue is changed, then we also need to exchange the expenditure line items. And because the new EPO was predicting to have quite a bit of savings. Our consultant wanted us to see 6 months' worth of claims to make sure that that was in fact a reality. And at that point, once we had that data, we did put in the budget amendment to reduce the revenues and the expenditures. So I just kind of wanted to clear that up for the group. Last December then, if you recall, we received ERRP money, which is our early retiree reinsurance program money. That's a federal program that allows us to use that money to offset premium increases or claims expenditures. Also last fall, we started our employee wellness program with health risk assessments and health screenings, and that was conducted for all employees that were covered by the insurance program. So here's a five-year history of the self-insurance plan. It shows here, and I just went back 5 years because I had that data easily readily available, but you can see in 5 years ago our balance started at a little over $103,000, and at the end of the year we had raised that to a little over $500,000. Well, the next year we took a pretty big hit if you look at those numbers, and as a result of that, the following year we evaluated it and decided to close the city pharmacy as a result. The following year then, we started off at $321,000, and at that point we outsourced the city clinic, and we saw the money starting to grow from not having that additional expense. Now for this year, through August 31st, you can see where our fund is where it's sitting right now. So it has grown significantly as a result of what we believe is the wellness program and our employees being healthier, as well as the great savings that we're seeing in claims through our program with community.
Lisa, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Just by looking at that slide, how does the ending balance in 08, 519, jump up to 581?
That's a good question. Back in those days, because we had our own pharmacy, we would see a rebate that would come back from the pharmaceutical companies, and so after the end of the year, if those dollars came in, they would have to be applied to the balance, and that's why we could start off higher.
Lisa, was the Blue Book the source of these numbers?
Yes.
Those are likely year-end audit adjustments. You'll notice that the reality is that your ending balance from one year is the beginning balance for the next year. What she's done is pulled those from our monthly reports, and those don't take into account year-end audit adjustments because they haven't occurred yet. So that was the example she gave, was one of those items which would have been one of those year-end adjustments.
Right.
And that's a big one in 09 from 167 to 244, so that's...
Absolutely.
One of the biggest audit adjustments that occurs has to do with run-out. We book a liability associated with claims which have occurred before the end of the year but don't get paid because the documentation, the claim paperwork doesn't get submitted and satisfied until after the year end. The industry calls it run out. It's just an accounts payable type liability at year end.
Mr. Alexander?
One of the many downsides to a city manager leaving is that all the discussions you had with them also leave. And Harold had a really good memory, he had a really good understanding. And I had some questions for him, and one of them was, how big is this fund? How big do we want this fund to end up? Because the bigger the fund, the more stability. What is our fund goal?
Michael?
Do we have one? I mean, Harold and I had discussed it in philosophy. You know, we think, I don't remember a goal set, but.
Well, what you have right now is a fund which has approximately $7 million a year in expenditures. Based on those GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association guidelines, you would want a 60 to 90 day fund balance to account for variations in activity.
There was
It's a big standard. It's a very normal standard for run out to have 90 days.
Yeah, but there's an advantage to having a bigger fund, and I guess we're hit with so much information that I forget the details when it's a year out.
Well,
but there is an advantage to having a big fund.
Well, yes. Let me kind of finish laying that cornerstone. 90 days, that means 90 days worth of expenditures, which is approximately 1/4 of the annual budget for the year. So 1/4 of 7 million, I think, is about 1.75 million. That's 90 days worth of expenditures. Now that available fund balance, we would want net of liabilities. Otherwise, it's not fund balance. And so the run out is already taken out of that. If you have $500,000 worth of run out, we book that as to the extent that it qualifies as a liability, it's booked as a liability. To the extent that it's not yet a liability, we book it as reservation of fund balance or designated reservation of fund balance. So we try to back those liabilities and potential liabilities out of that fund balance. So you have a net pure fund balance. That's what fund balance is. And so 1.75 million would be our objective, and with a 90-day fund balance.
And to answer your question about the advantages of having a larger fund balance, that issue comes down to our stop-loss insurance. If you recall when we discussed that last year.
Bingo. We can lower insurance rates.
That is
That's
correct.
exactly right.
Yes, for our stop-loss.
So there'll be a discussion from council about how big we want. 1.75 may be a goal, but we may want it to be higher.
Correct.
That's a good point. That GFOA, that's just a general guideline, and it very much, a fund balance target ideally would be tailored based on the activity within the fund. The general fund is very seasonal in that property taxes don't come in till the second half of the fiscal year. Our water fund is very much that way, very seasonal with weak performance in the beginning. So those kinds of funds you would want to be on the high side of that fund balance. This one has not been that seasonal, and so there's not necessarily a seasonality element to determining this fund balance, but it very much does go to protection that allows you to decrease the co-insurance you buy.
And it's also, if you talk about a rainy day fund concept and you had to choose a fund that's already there, this is a pretty good one because it can really hit us hard in a single year with a rate increase, and we could soften the blows with this fund.
Right. At the same time, you got to be careful that you don't set yourself up in a position where what you do is pass on tough decisions because you don't have to make a decision.
Right.
So
You're right.
And you got to remember, all of this is taxpayer money. So at some point, you're holding on to a lot of money. And should you be giving it back to them, or should you be offering more services or better services? Or so there's a lot of discussion there. But anyway, this has been a good discussion. Is there any other question for Ms. Marley on this item?
Well, there's a little bit more.
Oh, please. Let's
Sorry.
move forward.
If I can, just one of the thoughts on that is I agree we need to look at the fund balance, but one of the things that I was interested in is a rate stabilization, so we don't get hit with a huge one. And so the goal would be to have the fund balance at a reasonable amount where, just say next year, we come across and now we, for whatever reasons, our loss, whatever it may be, that we're going to go up. Well, I don't want to just pass the buck, but at the same time, instead of having to double the rates,
Sure.
We can ease into it and use some of that fund to bring that down and, and make the shock a little bit less for both the employees and for the city. But then the goal would be we would have to work our way into it,
Right.
not just kick the can down the road. So
Right.
anyway, I'm
Yeah,
glad to see this is
that's-
moving in that direction.
Amen. So, to your point, 167,000 wasn't much help if you had a bad year, but $1.6 million could sure
Right.
be some help if you had a bad year. And so that makes this good stuff.
Now, if you notice that the bottom of that screen, at the bottom of the last ending balance, this does not include the ERRP funds that we received, which was the $343,000. All right.
Lisa, let me ask,
Yes.
go back to the slide. Have you kept track, or has the wellness program made an impact at all? I mean, what's
Well,
going
it's
on
a-
there?
That's a great question and very timely. We are just now starting the second year of doing the wellness screenings. They started last week. They run for 8 weeks long, and employees will be coming over here to the convention center to get their health screenings done. So at this point, we had our baseline from last year, and by mid-November, we will have all of the screenings done, and we'll see how we've stacked up against last year's numbers. So that's a very good question. All right, so had we not made these changes to our plan design last year with going to an EPO, then the city, the employees, and the retirees would all see an increase in premiums this year of 16.4%. So by us making the changes to that plan, we have had a great savings to our premiums.
I think that needs to be emphasized, that introducing that competition, 16.4% on 7 million would have been in excess of $1 million in increase borne by employees, retirees, and the city, or some combination thereof. So I think that the plan change that was introduced last year and implemented has yielded tremendous benefits to all stakeholders in this.
Plus, we wouldn't have the fund balance we have now.
That is correct.
That's true.
So based on our experience with claims this year and on our normal trend with insurance, if you recall, Holmes Murphy described that to us last year, the fund is going to require a modest premium increase to offset that trend. Now, there are several ways that could be accomplished. We've listed 3 here. The first one is a shared cost between the city and the employees, which would be an equivalent of 2.5% for the next year. And these are the premiums here. I know that's a little hard to see, but it would cause the city's contribution to go up from $357 to $366 per employee per month, and it would also show dramatic, or fairly dramatic, increases across the board on the other tiers. So that is one choice. The second choice is that the costs go completely to the employees and the retirees. In that case, it results in an 11.8% premium increase, which are these numbers here. And as you can see, that really starts to jump up there pretty significantly. And then our third option is to utilize $142,000 out of the ERRP funds. This would mean that there would be no increase in contributions for the city, for the employees, or for the retirees across all tiers. And again, that would remain, all of the premiums would remain the same. Now, if you remember, the federal statute for the ERRP funds allows us to use those monies specifically to reduce premiums or to help in claims payments. Now, we met with the Insurance Review Committee again, and we've shown them this information, and they support staff's recommendation to utilize the $142,000 out of the ERRP. That'll still leave us $201,000 to go to your point, Mr. Hirschfeld, of, next year we would have to come up with another $142 to start off with where we were if we were to increase premiums next year, and we would have that money in the fund to cover that. So at this point, we are seeking your permission on how to move forward, and our recommendation would be to utilize the ERRP funds. We do have a bit of a limitation on those fundings, or those funds to take place before the year 2014. Depending on how the elections go and whether or not Obamacare healthcare reform continues to stay on as planned. If that goes into effect in 2014, it may be that we will see so many dramatic changes to health insurance that we would not be able to utilize those funds. They're very specific what it has to be used for, and if there's changes that occur based on the federal law, then we might not be able to use them. So our suggestion would be to use them before 2014 if at all possible.
If we see some kind of a change in the year that might cause a restriction, then we could consider some kind of a mid-year funding strategy change that could flow through council in the form of direction and a budget amendment. So while that threat remains, I think we do have some options for addressing it if we see a problem.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it's something that should be talked about when the time comes.
Sure.
So. Questions, comments? Okay. What else, Ms. Marley?
That is all I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do need a decision.
You're
make
asking
a-
for action
That is
on
correct.
premiums,
I'll
right?
make
That's
a,
correct.
a motion for approval of this item.
Second.
as it is.
ERRP funds?
ERRP funds.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Silvas and a second from Mr. Hirschfeld to use the $142,000 from the ERRP funds and leave the contribution from the city and from the employees where it is today. Is there a further question on that? Is there public input on that? Let me call for that vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank
Good
you.
job, Ms. Marley. Good
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you.
This next item is number 18, requested by Councilmember Farmer, has to do with a discussion regarding the dental benefits for retirees and cost of living adjustments for retirees. So, Ms. Farmer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In visiting with constituents, I discovered, and I did not recall or remember this, that the benefits that we do offer to retirees, they are offered the health insurance as same as current employees, with the exception they do not, are not permitted to participate in the dental. And I did not recall, or nor do I recall, what the difference in the breakdown or why the dental was not offered to retirees. And so I wanted the opportunity to discuss this and to discuss why. And in light of that, we just used the early retirement, the ERP money to help us reduce or to maintain premiums for all of the employees. I don't want us to forget is because of that benefit, that plan, we shouldn't exclude our retirees in receiving some of the benefits that the others are getting. And I wanted to know what the approximate cost to us would be to add the dental back in for retirees. That's what I wanted to discuss today. And then the next item that I wanted to discuss was the COLA to the retirees and an explanation as to how that worked and how the retirees are looked at for increases in their cost of living in their retirement income. Okay?
All right. I did pull that information for you, and we have 224 retirees before the age of 65. And for there to be, for the city to pick up the premiums for that dental coverage, it would be $40,911 per year. And then if we wanted to offer it to the post-65 retirees, there are 232 of them. And the premiums for them would be $42,372. So for about $83,000 a year, that coverage could be covered for the premiums. Now, what that doesn't account for is whatever the claims would be. There wouldn't be any way to predict what that would be for 450 people. I don't know.
Do we know why they received it prior to us changing the plan, is that not correct?
That's correct, yes.
Do we know why that we didn't include it in the new plan?
No. When an employee retires, they're offered health insurance. That was how it was originally set up in the statute or the charter or ordinance, whatever it is that offers that to retirees, but dental was not included. Quite often, employers do not offer dental insurance to retirees. We did do a survey of our sister cities, and it's about, let's see, there were 8 people that responded. 6 do offer it, 2 do not. Nobody funds it. They offer it to retirees, but have the retirees pay for it, except for Wichita Falls, who does that. Many of the cities cut off the benefit at age 65 if they do offer it to retirees. But, there's no, I couldn't find any reason why we don't do it. But to answer your inquiry about using the ERRP funds for that, ERRP funds are merely for medical, not for dental, so we wouldn't have that as an option. It would be something that would be coming out of our fund balance to pay for that.
Yeah, I understand that, but
Okay.
because of the issue of a
Right.
retiree program, and then here
Gotcha.
we just don't include our retirees, we benefit from that
Sure,
program for them.
sure,
But we don't
absolutely.
include them in the dental plan, and I couldn't understand why, and I don't remember or recall why we removed it this last go-around.
Well, it's not been in effect for a number of years. We haven't had dental for
Since, what,
retirees.
2000?
Probably.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
And I
know-
just wanted some feeling from the rest of the council, just some discussion as to how they feel about it.
I'm just trying to get my hands around the number.
Mhm.
About $15 a month per retiree, is that about right? I'm thinking
Yes, 1522.
That is a lot less than what it really costs to go to the dentist. Dentist, I mean, the older you get, the more your teeth fall apart, the more you need a dentist. And $15 is not a bad price to have insurance. So,
Correct. And
The
if
cities
you
that-
remember with what you just said, I mean, obviously, those claims are going to be coming to us. That's not accounted for. in
Are
those
you saying
numbers.
our dental program is self-insurance also?
That is correct.
It's not a
Oh, wait, I'm
reinsurance?
sorry. It is not self-insured. I beg
Okay,
your pardon.
So this is basically just a policy?
It's insurance
That's
we buy.
correct.
You're
That is
right.
correct.
So, you know,
So-
what about letting them buy into our program similar to Cobra or such?
Well, per se, that's what she said most of those cities are doing. What she said was they're letting the retirees into their system. What she said, most.
But they pay for
Yeah,
it.
most
Yes,
of the
right.
cities are not, the 232 folks in our system, retirees in our system that are 65 or older, would not be included in most cities, is what she said. But she said the 224 retirees that are below 65 are included in most of the cities that she studied or got
Mhm.
feedback from, but as a pass-through, what you said. You're saying to them, you can pay $15 a month and be part of our insurance buy, and it would certainly be to their advantage. And so, I'll be right with you. Isn't that correct? Isn't that what you said?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, Mr. Morrison?
Will our insurance company allow them?
We will have to,
join?
we will have to check on that. I don't know if they'll have any age requirements, if there will be a mandatory cutoff at 65, but we will check that if you want us to look into that.
But we could start looking now before January
Absolutely.
1, the premium year starts.
Absolutely, because the timing is perfect. We're going to be having our open enrollment in November, so this will be the perfect time to do it.
Lisa?
Yes.
No, I just had the question. The reason you cut them up at 65 is because then what?
I don't know. I mean,
Social
Medicare
Security,
doesn't, yeah,
Medicare?
Medicare doesn't cover any kind of dental
they
benefits.
don't.
So it goes into effect Medicare goes into effect at 65. And with Medicare coverage for dental insurance, whatever they cover in dental, I'm not sure.
They
I
don't
just
cover
know
much.
that we don't.
Guess.
I have no idea, but
Yeah.
but again, the thing, bear in mind what the liability you're taking on is if you let them in the system, which I think should be considered. But if you let them in the system, they're paying so much for the premium. If they are having problems and they have claims, the claims come into the system. It's an outside insurance buy, so the insurance company you're with would be on the hook for paying those claims. But how that comes back
And
is,
how that impacts us for
yeah,
our
how that
future
comes
rates.
back for
Correct.
all employees and for those retirees and all that, if you decide to do it, is the next time you go out for insurance, for dental insurance, it's not $15.22 a month to cover it. It's, $22.29 because they're going to raise the premiums enough. So that's the balance that you're wanting to think through, is do you want them in the system or not, and so forth. So I'm bringing that up. It's not going to be a gift. It's going to be, they're in the system now, but whatever their claim experience is will affect what it costs to have dental insurance for existing employees and retirees, whoever you let in the system.
You're just playing the devil's advocate because.
Well, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure it's all
Yeah.
clear. It's a discussion item, so I'm just trying to give as much information as possible. Okay? Okay, other,
On the cost of living question, Michael will be addressing that for you.
Councilmember Farmer, how in-depth an explanation would you like a
Well,
brief
what-
explanation on COLA?
On the COLA, and the reason I wanted to bring it up just for discussion, because this is pretty complicated. The stuff that I have received from TMRS, it's complicated to understand, and I think without slide views and how it affects us, the city, if we tried to look at what we could do through the retirees, through COLA for cost of living. Right now, the only cost of living, the way I understand it, that they get is through the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, when that changes in small adjustment. But the city never does anything to increase the contribution to the retirees through the COLA. Is that correct?
Not entirely.
Okay.
The city elects a participation level or a benefit level in TMRS, and there are some statute or controlled options that we select from.
Okay, let me tell you what I'm after. In listening to constituents and listening to staff as to how the COLA and the retirees is affected in their cost of living and their retirement income, I've gotten mixed signals from staff telling me that, well, the TMRS representative has to come to us to increase that amount, and TMRS telling me no, that the cities may choose to grant a COLA increase. What I would like from this meeting, and just discussion it here from the other council members, is for that to be worked up to show us with slides that each council member has the opportunity to review and to look at as to what our options are at any kind of grant or increase to the retirees, the City of San Angelo retirees, in their COLA plan.
That's an excellent request, and we can work that up. I understand that one.
Okay.
It can't, in fairness to you and the retirees and employees, it can be very complicated, and it's a little not intuitive the way some of it works because of statutory limitations. And
But
so
I
we'd be
wanna-
glad to work up.
I want to make this clear to existing retirees in the plan out there. Our budget for the year is set already, and this isn't something that would take place immediately. This has to be studied as to how it impacts the city in our budget, but I want those numbers worked up now and as to look at them now.
No problem.
Thank you. And the other council, I really would like their opinions.
No, I think it's informative.
I agree.
Thank you.
I mean, it's informative, so then we would decide what we can or can't do, but it would be based on data.
Because I don't recall in my tenure on council that the COLA, the retiree plan, how that works has really ever been explained or that I understand it. And I think this council needs to understand so we can plan forward.
Do you want a comprehensive discussion, which could take a long time, or do you just want to look at restoring the COLA benefit which existed before a few years back? That's really what's generating the discussion among retirees.
I'm not looking at restoring. I want a comprehensive study in what we can do. I don't want to restore blindly what, was removed out there.
No, but you want to know what that would cost.
Yes,
That's what
I
you're
do.
really wanting to know.
Yes.
That's what, we will orient the presentation around getting back where we were, what it would cost, and what it would take in the way of council action. Absolutely, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Marley, it's my opinion that this next item is going to take more than 14 minutes. What do you think? I have a hard cutoff today at noon and then coming back afterwards. So if it's okay with council, what I'd like to go ahead and do is break now and then come back after executive session.
You could take 20.
20.
Yeah. Would be good.
Don't mind
Do we
taking
have
20.
Public
I'm glad to.
discussion on item 18.
Okay, I think what you heard was everybody agrees with what you asked for.
No, I said public discussion.
I don't mind that at all, of course. Is there someone that would like to give public input on item number 18? Okay. Ms. Farmer, thanks for the help. Okay. I'm going to skip item 19. I'm just trying to keep an eye on it. It's 11:47. I want to be sure and shut down just a few minutes before 12. And so I'm going to skip over to item 20. And this is the second public hearing in consideration of adoption of an ordinance levying property taxes for the City of San Angelo for the 2012 tax year. Presentation by our budget manager, Morgan Trainer. Good morning.
Good morning. You'll recall last time we introduced a tax levy of 78.1 cents per $100 evaluation, and that's a half-cent reduction on the property tax rate. So today is the second public hearing on that.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve and a second related to adopting the property tax rate at 78.1 cents. Okay, is there public input on this item? Further questions or comments from council? Okay, call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. What's number 21?
21 is landfill fees. We discussed that months and months ago, and this is implementing landfill fees. And then we did an update here a couple of months ago. We just need to increase those fees based on regulatory, operating, and other issues which are putting that upward pressure on. This conversation goes back actually into the previous budget cycle and is not really the same conversation as all the other fees discussions which are going to follow, but nonetheless has a similar impact if you're paying the fees.
Okay. Folks, you'd like to try to do this in 10 minutes? 9 minutes? Yes. Let's get started, Mr. Dixon, and if necessary, we may have
As Michael
to-
said, all this is before you today is the amended fee schedule to implement those rates that y'all talked about on June council meeting, the laundry list that he talked about of the unfunded expenses that we have out there. And I don't really have a presentation. It's just the amended fee schedules for
This is
first
as,
reading.
as they recommended at that time
That's
with the
correct.
stepped approach. Recall that we had originally talked about an increase. What came out of that meeting was a stepped approach.
Okay, and so you're saying, though, we didn't adopt it. We just said, here's what we want it to look like. You're bringing it back and saying, now adopt it?
Yes, sir, because that was a concept and determination of amounts kind of discussion. This is implementing the ordinance which authorizes those fees.
Okay.
This has nothing to do with my water bill. This is just the landfill. Is that
That's correct.
That is correct.
Well, your comprehensive utility bill has on it a trash
Oh, Lord.
collection fee, and this affects that fee.
Other people call that the water bill.
Yes, although it contains water, sewer, trash,
So it's
and
stormwater.
stormwater fees.
So for a residential, single-family residence, it will go up 21 cents per month.
The first year it goes up 65 cents. The second year is 21 cents.
Okay.
We as council, I guess, need to get accustomed to the comprehensive billing, city's comprehensive billing. I had a citizen call me last week, and he referred to it as that, and I didn't know what he was talking about. And it was, oh, you mean your water bill? And that was my mistake.
Well, I'm struggling to remember that, but in fairness, we beat Will Wilde up a lot with the water rates, and in fairness to him, there are other things on there that we pay. So I'm trying to be fair to Will, but I'm having trouble not calling it the water bill also.
So the $6.32
That's per ton at the landfill, what that will go up. The residential rates the first year go up 65 cents per
65
month.
per month.
The second year will be 21 cents, an additional 21 cents. All the fee schedule had to be amended to implement those increases that y'all had talked about.
And where does that say in the ordinance? Is it on there? I saw a bunch of numbers. I just didn't see the 65 cents or the.
Well, that's
65 cents is the change in the amount. So you'll see a number that was $8 and change go to $8 and change plus 65 cents.
right.
I just see the 21 cent increase. I guess I need to add them all up, huh?
I think we've gone through all of this. I think this is the matter now of saying you did all the work, you told them what to
Yeah.
do. Now here it is. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve this as presented and try to move it forward.
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Farmer. Further discussion on the item. Public input on the item. Call for this vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item 21 is behind us. And now 22 through 28 are to run together. And I don't need to forget 19, but I know we can't get that done. You know, do 22, Morgan.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
on items 22 through 28,
Yes, sir.
since we've got a brand-new manager coming on next month, we just gave back a half a cent of property tax reduction, which will amount to about $180,000 total. And now we are talking about fees that will approach $250,000. So we just gave our citizens back a half cent of property tax reduction and saved them $180,000. And now we're coming in the back door and we're increasing fees to the point of $248,000. So we are actually increasing what our customers, our city player, are going to pay by $70,000. I would like to table every one of these 22 through 28 until our new manager gets here. Let him look at these things and see if he is in favor of fees that are actually charging our citizens more than what we just gave them back. These need to wait. It's too early to talk about these.
Well, I respectfully disagree because property tax is across the board to every property owner, automatic. And fees, a lot are user fees, the select folks who use or have an alarm system. You know, that's not across the board. They're individual, yes, they're fees, but a lot of times they're selected user, and I don't see it as the same.
Okay, I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, but I believe I do. I think you've already voted this through. I think this is a formality finishing up the budget process. So what am I missing there, Mr. Dane?
This is like the previous discussion on landfill. We've had the conceptual discussion. These are the numbers we want to see. In this case, like the landfill, the numbers you said you wanted to see, we've implemented in the budget. However, authorization to collect those fees doesn't exist. That authorization doesn't exist until the ordinance is updated. This is updating those ordinances and creating that authorization.
Mr. Morrison, the point I'm trying to make is if you don't want to do these fees, then you need to cut services $250,000, or the budget is not balanced.
I would just like for the new city manager to look at this. Before we make these increases, we've got a new man coming in, he's sharp with numbers. I would like for him to look at this and he approve these things because he's the one that's going to have to live with it.
But he also would have to figure out $250,000 of other revenue somewhere else, or he'd have to figure out $250,000 of cuts.
I don't like to give our citizens $180,000 back with one hand and then with the other hand charge them an additional $248,000. I don't think it's fair to our citizens.
Mr. Hirschfeld?
I guess just a question on this is that, you know, is this something we have to literally address today? Mr. Dane?
That would have been my question.
Councilman,
Can we put this off for a month, 2 months, and not really have, because if I remember right, even the budget that was presented had a little bit of a surplus, correct?
You're correct. There's a surplus in the budget as it was approved, and so it is not imperative that these fees be collected right away at the enhanced amount. And so there is an opportunity for council to delay. It will cause those revenues theoretically to be lower than budgeted, but with that surplus, you have some wiggle room.
There you go.
And I guess one other aspect on that is that, you know, here we're looking at drought level 3, and so we're already going to be hitting people with increased water rates just because what it is. I think it'd be nice to maybe push this out just a little bit. I'm not saying a year, just give us a little bit of breathing room here.
My opinion is we're going to hit them with higher rates because this is revenue. I mean, we don't switch from one bucket to the other, but I'm just saying it costs our city. You know, when an ambulance takes off and picks up somebody and and they charge the insurance company pays the ambulance fee.
This is not ambulance fees.
It's not in there?
No.
This is not ambulance fees. Well,
Okay,
that
but-
is going to be a separate discussion as directed by council.
Okay, but we're still, let me say it a different way. As a council, we have been pretty much united in the thought that we're going to redirect our expenses to the user who is gaining the service. And that our tax, that's one of the ways we've been lowering our tax rate, maybe franchise fees and other ways. But that tax rate is sky high. It makes it hard for somebody to come into San Angelo and make an investment into our city as an investor in a business or even a homeowner. In some cases, where they're values have been adjusted to what real values are. We've got to get that tax rate down. We got to press it down, and this is one of the methods we do it. It's just,
I'm not in disagreement with anything you said, but to me, this is in my opinion, this is a question of timing. That's all I'm saying, and I think.
Okay. I don't,
That's my.
it's 11:58. We're not going to get to resolution on this item, and so let me ask that we come back and reintroduce item number 22, further the discussion, get a vote made about tabling it and all those kinds of things. It's 11:58. Let me take us into executive session at this time, come back with item number 19 and then 22. At this time, it's 11:58. I'd like to take, we are taking the council into executive or closed session. Executive session is available under the provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, Exceptions to the requirement that meetings be open, Section 551.072, to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. Section 551.071, to consult with an attorney on matters related to the Tri-City Water Initiatives, and Section 551.087, to discuss any financial or other incentive to a company related to conducting economic development negotiations.